Our next speaker in this great Congress has the probably most cooler name for a speaker along the morning. He's Kim Keats Martinez. It's powerful. Kim Keats Martinez. Big applause for him. You can be here or you can be with the microphone there. And Kim, tenemos que decirte, además de parte de toda la organización, que lo sentimos muchísimo por Steven. Queríamos tener unas palabras para con vosotros desde todos los miembros de este tercer congreso. Y muchísimas gracias por hacer el esfuerzo de venir, porque sabemos que no tenéis que estar pasando un buen momento. Así que muchísimas gracias, de verdad. Otro aplauso, por favor, para Kim.
A ver. Okay. So I guess we speak in English, right?
Yeah.
So a quick note, just what's been said is Stephen Taylor, which was in effect the other half of what EKON was, died in a paragliding accident last week, basically a week ago. There will be a wake for him tomorrow in El Tanatorio Sur at 6 p.m. on Thursday. So, and people who knew him, if you didn't, it doesn't matter. If you want to send flowers, fine. And if you want to show up and show your appreciation to their family, that's also good. Right. Okay. Everyone knows that I usually have a lot of slides to go through to tell a particular story. This particular presentation has also a lot of slides, but I'm not going to speak to all of them since you're going to get a copy afterwards. Okay? So, Christ, even I can't see that. Me va a ayudar un poquito que no veo nada.
What?
Right. I'm going to have to make it up as I go along because I can't see what it says. Is there a reason? ¿Hay una razón por la que no se ve nada? I mean, I didn't really want to read from the screen, but I did want to use it as a guide. Bueno. I'm going to turn around, while I look at my own notes here. The current commotion that's going on in the various commodity markets obviously has a significant impact on the deployment and the development of the renewable markets. Is it good or is it bad? In some ways, it could be bad if we have lots of intervention in the market. On the other hand, it's obviously good because the prices are high, and even though there is an inflationary aspect to the cost of getting renewable facilities built, there's still a margin to be made, right? So that's just a sort of short, medium-term type view on that. The only other thing to say about it is, how do you help yourself take a view as to and how much trouble we're going to be in, right? Don't worry, the guys at the back who can't read this, because even I can't. Así que no se están perdiendo nada, ¿vale? So just listen to what I'm saying rather than anything else. So. We turned a corner. We thought we were going to turn a corner around COVID when the pandemic closed down and everything started to pick up. And then we have this particular situation on the supply side, which I describe as a sort of perfect storm, because we've also got the Russian invasion, effectively the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and then we have a particular constraint with respect to the availability of gas. Now, why does gas matter? By the way, I'm a market advisor on the electricity side, so just to cut a long story short, there's a certain level of demand which has to be met. There's a certain number of carbon-free or thermal-free resources, clean resources, which can provide supply, but there's a thermal gap. And when there is a thermal gap, then you need to call upon the standby type of assets, which are these gas-fired power stations. And therefore, all they're doing, by the way, is practically passing through the marginal cost of their actual cost of gas and cost of carbon dioxide. Because the price of gas is very high, the price of electricity is very high. Right? Now, how long is this going to last? I wanted to at least touch on that base first. We prepare a sort of quarterly report, and I update it. If anyone ever wants to get at least the presentation of it without having to buy the report, just hand me your details, and I'm happy to include you in that mail out. if you can see here, this is baseload prices, and the intention here is just to say, look, there is obviously a short-term spread as to where it is that the prices could arrive at baseload electricity. The thing to bear in mind is there will be enough renewables coming on, in my opinion, if it does start to rain. Even if demand stays very stagnant, there should be a sort of recovery of prices. But what I mean is that we come back to a normal level, you know, in a few years' time. Does it really matter whether the gas price has to come down to achieve that particular goal? And I think probably not, in the sense that there's going to be plenty of renewables around. You can take a bet. I'm not investing directly in it, other than I want, if someone can help me put photovoltaic on top of my building. But apart from that, you know, I'm not really in a position to take positions in the market. But there's a lot of volatility. No one really knows where these things are going to, they're going to show up, right? Okay, this chart, when you look at it and slowly and you look at it and you take an interest, is actually quite instructive, in the sense that you can see things such as, you see this orange bunch of things. This is daily generation by different types of capacity in Spain. This orange stuff here is the combined cycle power stations, los ciclos combinados. Right? So what you can see here, people tell you the story, X percentage of CCGTs have been dispatched, and it's much higher than it has been in ages, and things like that. And this basically just makes it very clear that it's true. The summer has been very dry. The summer has been very hot. The peak demand occurred in the summer, usually occurs in the winter time, for example, and we just have a lot of combined cycle power stations. Another reason these guys are running a lot is, I'll get into it in a second, but basically because the cogeneration facilities have not been running since the middle of June very hard. They usually provide a bit of base load, 5 gigawatts or so, and they've been 40% because of something I'm going to talk about here, la excepción ibérica, as it's called. Okay? And if you see, too much information. Oh God, yeah. This isn't a really nice PowerPoint presentation. I don't know what the guys did here. It's not my fault. Right. These charts. The charts on the left-hand side basically are cutouts of the one I saw before, and you can see things like if there's a lot of wind on particular days and sun, then the price tends to be lower, and vice versa. The nuclear power stations are the guys in the middle, and we have the guys at the bottom, which are the ones that help set the price. Prices don't seem to be really affected by how much CCGT. There's another one people don't seem to understand. How much combined cycle power station is being dispatched in the market doesn't really matter, because they're all basically the same type of machines. Vale? So they're same sort of machines, so what basically happens is the prices go up to a particular level and then tend to stay there. It's not that you get these huge spikes, okay? So that's the thing to bear in mind, and that's why here, for example, see if I press the right button, here you see orange spikes, but you don't see these black. Now this is the average daily price. You don't see that one also spiking just because there's a lot more combined cycle. Okay, just a few things to bear in mind. Thank you very much. I don't know what you did, but that worked. Here we have the hydrology. These are the levels of dispatchable, available hydro in the dams, and that red line is now, and we're basically at the lowest historical. This is from going back, since 2009. 2009. So in the last 10 or so years, the water levels are as low as they've ever been. Does that mean that you turn on the tap and there's no water? No, right? In the UK, we'd already be having what they call watering bans and things like that. They're still watering the garden where I'm staying. Vale. I'm not going to talk about this. That was about demand. Okay, this is the one I wanted to raise, especially for those of you who are aware of the political reaction to the high electricity prices, and especially those who are either within Spain who don't understand what's going on, or those who are outside looking at Spain wondering what's going on. And the main difference is something called the Iberian exception, which was a process through which the thermal eligible power stations, namely combined cycle power stations, coal-fired power stations, those that have not closed, and any sort of cogen that is not covered through the regulatory regime, can basically get a subsidy on their gas price. They get a fixed payment. It's basically determined by this formula. It's defined in one of the boletines de Estado, where everything's written in Spain from a legal perspective. The only thing I draw your attention to is if you look at the green arrow right here, the blue and the black lines that here look very separated out, here were actually nearly jumping on top of each other. What that meant was that when the gas prices were moving up and down, the price also moved up and down. and until, that is, the introduction of this particular measure. Because what it basically created was a gap between where it was that the gas price was going to be and what the gas-fired power stations would want to be offering into the market at, to what they were actually offering, because there was this big subsidy. ¿Vale? Okay? Don't worry about it. If you didn't get it first time, you can go and read about it. I've written a bunch of papers about this stuff. Just Google me and you'll find it. To cut a very long story short, that cost that goes directly to those combined cycle power stations, right? It's not, by the way, they call it a cap on gas, but it's not a cap on gas. What it is a subsidy to eligible facilities. And then people argue and say, no, it's not a subsidy because the government's not paying it. You're dead right. We pay it as consumers. Anyone who benefits from the reduction in the electricity wholesale price will pay for it as a top-up in their electricity bill. The net result over the period until about last week was that the effective reduction in your costs of electricity within your regulated tariff would be only about 16%, 16%, el descuento. But if you compare what the subsidy has done to the wholesale electricity price, is that it's reduced it by 50%, 50%. ¿Vale? So this is where the confusion is coming in. A lot of people are saying, well, why didn't we get all the benefit from it? Why are we paying back? And all these other wonderful measures of ignorance. And it's all based around not simply understanding what it is. Now, is there a problem with communication at the level of the government? Yeah, sure. But, I'm not, get some influencers with TikTok. I'm sure they can make it much more entertaining. Or maybe they should come to me. Maybe I can figure a way to do it. Right. The thing here I'm saying is what were the future markets working? So if you look at French and you see prices at 600 and here we're at 250 or 200, the question is, the French are going, why have you got such cheap prices? And a lot of Spaniards are saying, why are we gifting free electricity to those guys? It's not true, by the way. Just ignore all that. But the thing is that it does influence. As soon as this measure came on, and you're seeing the impact, not only the red line here is an average monthly price, right? And the green lines, just because I wanted it as a reference. But then here you can see how we came to a big spike in prices, and the prices for the futures for next year and next quarters is basically a lot lower. In fact, if you look at the futures, this particular measure should stop at the end of May. The futures don't tell you that it's going to stop in the end of May. The futures say very clearly that the market thinks that they're going to be extended. And the reason I think that is a reasonable assumption is because the rest of Europe is basically catching up to a situation where Spain was a year ago. Spain, the reason why the government in Spain is so interested in the spot price is because the way the regulated tariffs to vulnerable consumers are determined is directly to what's going on in the spot price. So they had a very clear interest in trying to reduce that number, whilst the rest of Europe still were being supplied through medium and longer term contracts. In other words, they had fixed prices. Okay? But now that those contracts have begun to expire, the rest of Europe is basically finding themselves in a similar situation to Spain. I'm simplifying, but it's a reasonable straw man caricature about what's going on. Right. That's basically all I wanted to say. Just two things to bear in mind. Sorry. Just two things to bear in mind. Can we still make sense of the market? Right? The answer is yes. Okay? It might be more complicated, but actually it was already complicated 12 months ago. It was complicated 5 years ago if you're ever trying to understand the dynamics in the market, number one. Number two, does the sort of understanding of the fundamentals help you try and figure out what's going to happen short-term, medium-term, and long-term? The answer is yes as well. Short-term, you'll still be keeping a very close eye on because we still have that thermal gap. We don't have enough renewables to meet all the supply. Let's hope that this winter is windy and mild, which is likely to happen, by the way. I mean, third year of La Niña, not very common. Normally La Niña comes in batches of 2. But it might also mean it's a bit dry, so we might not have as much water. If it is raining, be happy. If it's not raining, start praying for it. And in either case, hopefully, because remember, when the wind comes, when the rainy season, when the jet stream comes along, we also pick up in wind, so we could get more wind generation as well, and we want all of that. Are we going to be having a problem of supply over the winter? The answer is no. Don't worry about it, especially if you're sitting pretty in Iberia, because we have lots of regasification terminals. So even if everybody else runs out of gas, we're going to not run out of gas. We have to pay for it, but we won't run out of gas. But if you want my advice, don't put your heating on. Wear lots of layers, because that's what I did last winter. right? And therefore, just get accustomed to it. So at least if you have 2 floors, I work at the top, my wife works at the bottom. At the bottom, we had to keep the heating on, and the top, there was no heating. All right, so there's little measures. Now, medium, long term, renewables will still follow the path through. That's the way to go. And that's why I think that, if you're really trying to figure out where it is we're going to go towards, there are all these issues around renewables will be basically, the value of renewables will be reflected in the price. So we need to basically make sure that they're commercially attractive, number one. And number two, it brings into the whole issue of renewables are going to be a source through which we can use electricity for decarbonizing the rest of the economy, in particular through hydrogen, which is not the topic that I was going to talk about, but it will lead into some of the other issues and things that we're talking about here. Right. How did I do for time? Am I too fast this time?
Yeah.
¿Cuánto tiempo tengo?
You have like 5 minutes yet.
I'm going to enjoy it. Any questions? Oh, by the way, this one you might like. Just a subject that doesn't get picked up on very much. What is going on with the demand? People talk about demand destruction on the gas side, right? Because the gas price is so high that nobody can produce. Fair enough. The interesting thing is it's also going on in the electricity side. Now, I don't know if it's really destruction. I mean, I'm using less electricity. But if you look at here, you say, I'm just looking at to the other week, it's like demand is, compared to the same period of last year, it's like nearly 5%. Well, it's 2% less from the last time. But if you go back to 2019, we're still 4.6% below then, right? So demand's a lot lower than what it used to be. The shape of demand, this is sort of daily, by the way. All public information, I don't use anything that's not public. You basically see patterns, but the truth is demand for electricity this year has been a lot lower than any other, right? So if we can get more, oh, I had another comment as well. Because everyone's complaining about the electricity bill. If you pay 1,000 euros per year for electricity, right? It's basically 3 euros a day. So when someone comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm now going to have to pay 2,000," you feel slightly insulted. Oh, they've charged me twice as much. But the reality is, you're just being charged 3 euros more per day. Is that really a big incentive for you to adjust your consumption pattern? It is for me, because I'm a stingy kid. But it's an interesting point to raise to people and say, the incentives on getting people to change their habits, and then you wonder why it's so difficult to do so. The simple answer is, there's no real incentive in it. So until we get the Internet of Things in every machine in our houses, right, rather than, we get the cooking lady to come in the middle of the day rather than in the evening, things like that, I think it's going to be a bit difficult. Anyway, any questions? On that basis, I assume I've left you with a few thoughts of some degree of interest. Got a question?
What about the European context? The whole thing of market designing at the EU level?
At the EU level, the European Commission is a couple of steps. The question is whether there's something that can be drawn, I suppose lessons to be drawn from Spain for Europe, and the other one is how does the European electricity design get influenced by the fact that we have this particular problem. And that's why I alluded to beforehand, which is there are a lot of intellectual arguments going on about why this cap on gas, which is not a cap on gas, but that's what we've decided to call it, whether it could get picked up in the rest of Europe, right? My answer is they're having that conversation now, because now is when they're suffering from the particular problem that they're actually going to be seeing electricity tariffs increase significantly. So they'll turn over any rock to find any type of solution. The nice thing about this type of solution is it works, right? Very clearly has an impact. In the net effect, it's not very big, but actually it gives the impression of somebody doing something about it. I mean, at the end of the day, instead of having a same price for everyone, what you're doing is you're paying the higher cost to the specific guys that cost a lot of money. So it's like a direct transfer to them, and I'm an economist, so I can say this, most of you won't understand, but basically you're capturing some of the producer surplus and transferring it to the consumers, without it being a windfall profit tax, which is something else that's going to be applied. I think the windfall profit tax won't work because people have a lot of complex contracts. I think that there's reduction in the peak demand by 5% is going to make no freaking difference to anyone because we're still energy constrained. So it's not necessary. We're still going to have a thermal gap is what I mean, and therefore the prices will still be relatively high. At the end of the day, what we should be looking to do is not just reduce peak demand, but basically reduce consumption across the board. And that's where the main emphasis should be. And my sincere hope is that instead of listening to politicians bicker about how all the problems are and potential solutions are by messing with the supply of energy, I hope that they're going to be looking at some of the measures on the demand side, because at the end of the day, that's where I think most of the effort is going to come, and that's why I think we can all put a little grain of sand. But I could have told you that over coffee as well. So I don't change my story just because I'm up here. Bueno, ya, ¿no?
Thank you so much.
And let me just say one thing. I mean, we've been a supporter of the Energy Box guys, where it was PV Box before, right from the beginning. So it's always been a pleasure to work with you guys and stuff. And it's a real pity because we kicked this whole process off with Steven and stuff. But just to say, we'll miss the guy. Yeah.
Thank you.